Hi, I'm Cassandra.
And I'm Kate.
And we are part of the cultural engagement team at Central Bedfordshire Council.
This is Story Search, where we share stories of arts, culture, community and heritage from across Central Bedfordshire.
I'll share it with you. 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 I'll share it with you.
Story Search, celebrating arts and culture across Central Bedfordshire.
Ask anyone who knows about Ampthill history, they'll probably tell you about Catherine of Aragon and about the Masquerade. Those are the jewels in the crown of Ampthill history.
But it wasn't an ordinary puzzle book, and it wasn't for children. It was a treasure hunt, and it got global interest.
I deciphered the clues and decided the hair was buried in Scotland. So for our holiday one year, we drove up to Scotland, my wife, 2 children, mother-in-law and a dog.
I want to ask a question, and I want you to give me a yes or no answer, which is a bit of a strange one in a podcast. Do you know how it was solved? Do you know the solution to the puzzle?
I'm not sure what that thing is yet, but I think it's time to give it its moment in the sun forever.
So, Kate, we have left Dunstable and we are now in Ampthill for our second episode of our podcast. What are we doing here in Ampthill? You said you'd tell me.
Well, Ampthill is my hometown, so it has a special place in my heart. I've lived here for about 10 years now. But when I say to you, Ampthill, what does it make you think of?
I know that Ampthill is a market town in sort of the middle of Central Bedfordshire. It's a lovely little place to visit, actually, and very lucky to live there. I'm very jealous. There is a wonderful, great park there, and I know a little bit about one of Henry VIII's wives was forced to stay there.
That's right.
Something to do with not birthing a child or something.
One of those.
Is that it?
Yeah, so Catherine of Aragon was imprisoned in the
okay.
castle in the park.
Because there's a giant cross to remember her stay. Yes, and that is all I know.
Well, that's a key bit of information about the story I'm going to tell you today, but the story I'm going to tell you today is not about Henry VIII or Catherine of Aragon, but her monument is important to this. What I'm going to tell you about is this wonderful book that came out in 1979 by an artist called Kit Williams, and the book is called Masquerade, and it's so much more than a book. This book was released in 1979 and it was a puzzle book, but it wasn't an ordinary puzzle book, and it got global interest. I mean, it was frenzied.
So grown adults were undergoing a treasure hunt.
The treasure that people were hunting for was the golden hair, and the artist who painted all the pictures that are in the book, which we'll talk about, he also made this golden hair, and it's the most beautiful thing. And adults were taking flights from internationally to come and dig up places. The National Trust had to ask people to stop digging in their lovely lawns, and I don't want to oversay it, but some people were kind of driven a little bit mad by this. It was really a frenzy of activity.
So the artist who created the book actually buried the golden hair they made, and within the book left clues for people to try and find it.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so they buried it, and spoiler alert, it was found in Ampthill Park. So there is a link to Ampthill, which people of a certain age will remember, but of course this was, I think it was published in 1979, it was found in 1982, so it's people in their kind of late 40s, 50s and up who really remember this.
But it took people years to unravel the clues in the book and actually find it.
Just 3 years. Yeah, and as we will hear today, the person that actually dug it up just got lucky.
Wow.
Got really lucky. So it wasn't until I read the companion book to this, which was published some years later, which is called The Quest for the Golden Hair by Bamber Gascoigne. I didn't realise that the solution to the puzzle was entirely in the paintings. So Kit Williams worked on the paintings first and then added the text afterwards. I remember looking at this book as a child and trying to decipher some sort of symbolic meaning from the pictures. And I'm just flicking through some of the paintings here. I mean, how does it strike you? What does the artwork...
I mean, it's incredible to think that there is quite a lot of text and none of that actually matters in the treasure hunt. I mean, that's quite fascinating. There's lots of it's really vibrant colours, isn't there? And then coded language around the outside, which looks like it's to do with the picture. Strange puppets laying awkwardly on a beach, and it's very random.
Yeah,
how it looks.
Yeah, it's very layered. Kit Williams felt that a well-educated child could crack this.
Right. Was it somebody that age that actually found it then?
Well, there's a little bit of controversy about who found it.
Okay.
One set of people cracked the code,
okay,
and that was a set of two couples, and they were physics teachers, and they had really cracked it. They had cracked it in a way that it was designed to be cracked.
Wow.
They found the location.
Great.
But when they came back the next day to claim it, someone else had already got it.
What, the day before?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of the puzzle, and this is a bit of a spoiler, is that the location of the treasure was only visible on one day of the year. So the people who found it went there the night before to scout it out, but by the time they got there the next day, it'd been gone. And they even think that they might have touched it, but they didn't pull it up.
Story Search, Central Bedfordshire.
Hi, I'm Amy Warner. I'm the manager at Ampthill Library, and I moved up here 15 years ago. Full disclosure, I actually live in Flitwick. Yeah. Lots of times people come into the library and they say, oh, did this used to be a school? It's got the look of what people would consider a classic Victorian schoolhouse. On top of that is our weather vane, but it's really distinctive. And again, this tower with the weather vane, sort of the silhouette of that, I think of as the iconic image of Ampthill Library, if anyone wants an iconic image of Ampthill Library. So the weather vane incorporates a hare. The hare is really sort of symbolic of Masquerade. If you ask anyone who knows about Ampthill history, they'll probably tell you about Catherine of Aragon and about the Masquerade. Those are the jewels in the crown of Ampthill history. To me, at first glance, I would say it reminds me of like 70s prog rock album art. It's kind of simultaneously photorealistic in a way where you can see there's so much technical skill to the way things like, the skin textures are rendered and things, but also completely surreal in a way where it's so compelling because you kind of look at it, you can't really understand what it is. And I mean, that's clearly, I would imagine, Kit Williams' intention to make it compelling. And then if you build this treasure hunt aspect into it as well, the fact that you're searching for something, it almost like a really, really, really complicated magic eye picture where you have to kind of keep moving it to different distances and looking at it at different angles and trying to lock your eyes onto something that will kind of reveal something to you. But also, it's one of those things where I'm slightly in awe because I'm not someone who's good at cryptic crosswords. I don't have that sort of compulsion to solve extremely intricate problems. But it's so interesting to me that anyone could be bothered because personally I would look at the book, think, wow, this is skilled and also really far out and trippy, but I don't even know where to start in terms of unpicking the puzzle aspect. So the idea that people would get obsessed for years with pursuing that, what is it about some people's brains that finds that so compelling? And because there's the combination of the mystery that is the story of the book and the mystery around the solving of the book, you then get into so many aspects of human psychology and obsession. Kit Williams himself feels like a very mysterious character. I mean, I don't want to speculate too much because obviously we're not speaking to Kit here today and I don't know him at all. His sort of reclusiveness feels like that's another layer of that puzzle as well. And I suppose it probably allows a certain amount of projection onto him, because his presence is almost an absence in the story. And also the idea of what does it do to a person when you're an artist who creates this thing that has this completely unexpected avenue and degree of success that wasn't particularly something you'd sought or imagined for yourself or embraced, and it becomes like a sort of ball that's rolling down the hill, and then once the momentum goes, the thing's got a life of its own. And the way Masquerade played out was nothing to do with Kit Williams' intentions when he did the pictures. So I think there's a lot of meat in there if you're interested in human stories.
It's so interesting to hear your view. I want to ask a question, and I want you to give me a yes or no answer, which is a bit of a strange one in a podcast. Do you know how it was solved? Do you know the solution to the puzzle?
I don't know what to say. We can redo it.
Yeah.
I know broadly this thing about eyes and fingers and connecting up lines, and then you make a poem and the poem leads you to Ampthill. In the fine detail of the solution, I don't know. So
and do you know where it was found? Could you walk me to where it was found?
I could walk you to the ballpark of it, Kate. I could walk you to the Catherine Cross.
Yes.
In terms of the precise location of the shadow on the day,
we'd have to
wait for that day and go up at dawn, wouldn't we?
So in terms of people finding out more or investigating this for themselves, what would you recommend they do or read?
So the first, it's probably stating the obvious. The first thing I would think you would want to read if you're interested in Masquerade is the Masquerade book itself. And I think it's probably good to come to that relatively freshly and get your own impression in terms of understanding the history and the story around Masquerade. The kind of classic text for that is The Quest for the Golden Hair by Bamber Gascoigne, which we do have a reference copy in the library. Unfortunately, both Masquerade and Quest for the Golden Hair, I believe, are out of print now, and we have had copies go missing, so we're now down to our reference copies. And because they're so essential to Ampthill history, obviously we've got to try and preserve those things, because they're not as easy as they were to replace. Although I would say, if you're interested in, they are available to buy second-hand through, second-hand book dealers and online and stuff.
And people can come to your library and can have a look.
They absolutely can. The books are accessible. We've just got to try and protect them because they're such a valuable part of our collection here.
So, Amy, I did give you some homework before we had this conversation, and that was to read a novel that isn't by Kit Williams or Bamber Gascoigne, but by an author called Erin Kelly. And she has written a book that has been very much inspired by the story of Masquerade. I'm going to invite our colleague Liz to come and join us and have a discussion about this book and how it relates, because The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly is certainly a book you can get out of your local library. And
absolutely.
And I imagine it will give people a taste of what that kind of Masquerade madness was like at the time.
Hello, I'm Liz Roberts. I am a Culture and Engagement Officer for Central Bedfordshire Libraries.
So welcome, Liz. I'm very grateful for you coming along to have this chat, because I'm not a very good reader of fiction and so I really struggled. So I'm really delighted that you're able to come and read the book that we're about to discuss with Amy Warner, the manager here at Ampthill. And so I'm going to ask you a few questions about the book, The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly. And this is a very recently published book. It came out in 2022, and it is explicitly linked to the Masquerade story, which is the story we're exploring in Ampthill. So, Amy, would you be able to tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. The main characters in the book are two families. One of the families, the father of that family, is the artist who created a Masquerade-style treasure hunt at a similar sort of point. It must have been in the 70s. And then there are these two couples, so the artist and his best friend, and then both their wives, and they live next door to each other, and these houses sort of on the edge of Hampstead Heath. And then both families have children. So to some extent, the focus of the book is looking at the legacy of that Masquerade-style treasure hunt and phenomenon, and how it affects all the different members of the family in different ways. I'm not sure whether people listening will know, but Erin Kelly is already really well established as a very popular sort of writer of psychological thrillers. You're expecting that there's going to be a murder in there somewhere, and there is, and it's, so there's a sort of real life mystery that's very tangled and complex on top of the world of this treasure hunt and the people who have become obsessed with it over many, many years.
Now, both of you know the story of Masquerade. In what ways do you feel that the inspiration of Masquerade was apparent in the book?
I mean, obviously the treasure hunt in the book is based on a jewelled skeleton. So that's kind of, that element has definitely come from it, but that's in different parts and people have to find it. But the other thing that I felt really came across in the book when I was reading was that frenzy of the hunt and the kind of craziness around it, that, people who got involved in looking for the parts of this skeleton, this jewel thing, which, although were valuable, I think kind of the book within the treasure hunt became more valuable to people in that sense than the actual physical value of it. So that was I felt that definitely, because that was my feeling. I mean, having grown up and known about Masquerade when I was a kid, my mum had a Masquerade group, and they looked at the book and whatever, a group of teachers. They never got anywhere. They got bored after about a couple of months, I think. Yeah, I think, and everything that you read about the treasure hunt that Masquerade's caused, you definitely felt that with this story. Kind of art element to it as well, because there was a lot of talk of art in the book, and that was quite important. I mean, obviously other bits were different. Psychological thriller bit was
the murdering.
The murdering was separate, obviously, to the Masquerade story.
So Liz, it would be so interesting for us to just reflect a little bit about your experience of Masquerade as it happened, actually. But you've just referred there to your mum having a Masquerade group. Could you tell us a little bit, give us a bit of insight into what it was like? Was it in the newspapers or?
Oh yeah, it was everywhere. It was everywhere. I mean, I didn't live in Bedfordshire, so there were lots of discussions about where it could possibly be, and lots of people had theories. I think it really took off and people bought the book, and it was, the whole idea behind it was a phenomenon. I mean, it was like, nobody had ever seen anything like this before. But actually what we found was that it was very complicated, very, very complicated. And I think the initial burst of enthusiasm from groups like, my mum's teachers group waned quite quickly when they kind of got the book and thought, just what are we looking for here? I think it was really only the kind of hardcore treasure hunters, code solving people who probably continued with it. But it was worldwide. And yeah, I mean, it was obviously in the newspapers. I think it was probably on the TV. I think it was probably on those kind of like regional news programmes. Because when we moved here and we found out that this was the place where it had been found, that's when you kind of go back home and have that discussion, with your parents. And mum go, well, yeah, I don't know what happened to the book. The book was quite expensive, I think, to buy, relatively at the time. So I have a feeling that it wasn't the kind of thing that everybody had a copy of. So it wasn't, I suspect that my mum, their group, maybe one person had a copy. And they get together and look at it. But other than that, so yeah, that's my kind of recollection of it at the time. It was a big thing.
And Liz, the listeners will be hearing your lovely Welsh lint there. So this was your mum's group. Was happening when you were based in Wales?
In Wales, yes, in North Wales, yeah.
So it was a national.
Yeah, it was international, yeah. But it was, from my perspective, I mean, I know that afterwards, having looked at the archives that are here in the library and having researched it, a little bit more.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I'll go to Amy now. I'm wondering about whether reading the book, Erin Kelly's book, shed any new light on your prior understanding of Masquerade.
The thing that's so intriguing and that you can't really know in real life is what was going on in everyone's heads involved. What's that experience like from the inside? What's the experience like if it's your dad or your husband and your life is changed. It's sort of imagining if you had if Masquerade hadn't been solved when it was solved, if it was still out there, how would it look when it's transposed into an internet era, when there's message boards and social media and ways of kind of connecting up international treasure hunters through the internet. Quite a lot of the story is almost told through these kind of Reddit threads and forums where international people who've been involved in trying to solve this puzzle for decades are sharing tips, but also perhaps enabling each other's obsession. There's almost a shared identity and a kind of community within it. And it's interesting to think about because obviously at the time Masquerade was happening, it was much more like isolated, disparate groups of people who were all trying to solve it separately. I mean, perhaps it would have been solved really quickly because there was no mechanism to collaborate on that scale in terms of solving the problem. Or even, like you say, it was really interesting for you to say about how expensive the book would have been and that not everyone would have had it, because obviously now it would probably be an app or something and it would be, you'd instantly be able to get access to those pictures and the whole thing would have a very different character. So it's interesting because it's like a sliding doors kind of scenario where what if Masquerade had not been solved when it was solved? What if it had gone through to the future? And I think it's so ripe for a psychological thriller because the psychology of every angle of it is fascinating and mad.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about the obsession that happened. I very much enjoyed the Bamber Gascoigne book. There were case studies in there about people who really got stuck on this book, people who, even when it was found, didn't believe it had been found and are still carrying on looking.
And there is an element of that in the Skeleton Key as well, isn't there? And it's funny because you were saying, because that is the app business, because that is part of the story too. So, and also the unforeseen impact, I think, for Kit Williams as well, the author of Masquerade, the success of the book, had an impact on his life and how he could interact with the public after that. And kind of one of the key themes in the Skeleton Key is about the impact it has on one of the characters in the book and how their life changes because of this book. So I think there's parallels there too.
Yeah.
And in short, would you recommend the book?
Yeah, definitely. I don't normally read psychological thrillers. I read a lot of crime, but I'm more on the kind of like cosy crime side. But I really enjoyed this, and it kept me going, and I gave me that business about, you start off from an area of knowing nothing, and then by the end, all these different boxes have opened. And
do you know what, Liz? As I was reading it, that last say quarter where everything's unfolding, I was going back because there's so many things. It's a bit like watching a film like The Sixth Sense, where the reveal slightly blows your mind and it makes you want to go back and reread it through the lens of that reveal, because you realise how much you've been being misdirected or things have been veiled that are now revealed. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
That's wonderful. And what I do know about Masquerade is that Kit Williams did lay some traps for people. So there were partial puzzles in there, and people did go down cul-de-sacs and it wasn't right. So that's so fascinating to hear you say that about this work of fiction, that actually within the puzzle book itself, that was very much part of his gameplay. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you both reading that book for me and also coming in and having a chat about it. We're going to talk to somebody who is trying to reinvigorate the passion about Masquerade in the younger generations. So we will do that now. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Story Search, Central Bedfordshire.
So hello, my name is Ross Bowell-Williams and I'm a participatory artist, a creative producer and a trainee art therapist.
Hi Ross.
Hello.
It's really good to see you. We're sat
too.
here in Ampthill Library, which is a very cute little library, isn't it?
It's an absolute gem. Love it here.
Really, really nice.
Love it here.
You're relatively new to Ampthill.
I am.
When did you come to Ampthill?
So I moved to Ampthill in February 2022.
What a lucky place to land.
Yeah, it was.
I'm interested as someone who, again, I think is from Wales.
I am indeed.
Whether you had any knowledge of the Masquerade story before you came to Ampthill?
I had no knowledge of it, whether it was in Wales or when I was living in London. It was a very new thing. Just fell in love with the story, and it just prompted my own curiosity to take a deeper dive into all things Kit Williams and Masquerade.
Wonderful. So it really piqued your interest. So I'm amazed actually that you have only been here for a short amount of time, because the reason that I've invited you in to talk to me today is because I was very interested to see the work you were doing with Full House Theatre, which I'll allow you to explain it, but from a parent's point of view, I thought, wow, this is great. So it was a project that was Masquerade flavoured, is how it looked to me. Could you describe a little bit about that project that you did? It was this summer.
Yeah, it was. So it happened in May. So Full House is an arts charity and theatre company, and they're based in Ampthill. And they've been going for just over 20 years, I should say. So I have been fortunate to work with them, and when we were looking at pitching projects, I was approached and I said, I've really quite fancied this Masquerade book and using that as a theme, and I was at that time doing my deeper dive into it. They were looking to engage a particular group of young people that are quite hard to engage for lots of different reasons, and they went with it, and we started to cook up an idea of a project that had roots to Masquerade that could have relevance for the young people to the source text, but also it kind of brought it into the 21st century. So there was lots of nods to, and how do we translate this into a context that is exciting, dynamic and relevant for them. So it was based in Masquerade, and we did lots of translating of it using kind of game systems, the idea of escape rooms and puzzles. The invitation really is to go back to the site of where the golden hair was discovered, and if they had to create an art trail that had all these elements in it, that had a strong nod to the original treasure hunt, what would their version be and what relevance would they find in it?
That's fascinating. Now, as a mother of one of the attendees, I can tell you that I know nothing about what happened because she's 11 and she doesn't tell me anything at all. But I have seen some pictures, and I saw that you'd got images from the book, and they were figuring out some of the solutions to those puzzles. I'm interested really in a couple of things. One was, did the children come with any prior knowledge? And also, what do you feel that how did they respond to it once they found out about it?
It was a bit of a mixed bag, really. Some people came and they'd already heard about the legend of Masquerade, whether that came through family connections to it, or a few people I remember had read it or done something at school that was quite thematic to the text. So there was some prior knowledge, and I think the word masquerade had been bandied around a lot, and they didn't really understand what does that mean or where did it come from. So I think for a lot of them it was quite a new discovery, which was really lovely because it was kind of a new discovery for me at the same time. So it did feel like they were in it and we were unfolding it. So the first day was very much about sharing the legend of Masquerade. We supersized all of the pictures and words from the original book, and we just plastered them around the studio, and we just said, right, okay, to understand it we just need to experience it. Reading the story, understanding the puzzle. We brought in lots of wonderful video clips that came from documentaries that Kit Williams has done. They had giant meter rulers, and we literally solved the puzzles. We were like, we need to start at the beginning. Day 2 was about game design, looking about how we translate things outside. So we did everything from treasure hunts to building kind of mini escape rooms in matchboxes, activities that would form part of their art trail. So it was kind of segmented over 3 days.
And I should say that while my daughter told me nothing about what she did, she did let it slip that she knew exactly where it was, the golden hair was found. So whatever you did, the knowledge went in. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little more about how the children played the park.
We talked a lot about kind of what our language is. And when I say language, it's kind of our visual language, I suppose, which would give people a strong steer that it's rooted in Masquerade, but also if no one had a context or idea of what Masquerade is, they could still play it. So, and they obviously loved the golden hair, the one that is on top of the weather vane. We actually took a site visit here. We used the hair as kind of our emblem and our symbol for our activity trail. So we created 15 to 20 clay hairs that we then put gold leaf over. So they were kind of the thing that people would be looking for. We then chose locations around the park that would take people to... A lot of people know Great Ampthill Park. We wanted to take them to the locations that were featured in the book so they could literally play out and have a walkthrough of what it felt to go to these spaces. So they had the autonomy to make these choices, and we used an app called What 3 Words. So they became like the location scouts, and we looked at all of these areas that we felt that could be a good kind of combination. Yeah, we literally then translated the What 3 Word locations into activity sheets and maps. It was then a case of handing it over to the members of the public to come on that day, and those treasure hunters back in the 70s and 80s, and then the adults re-stepping the steps of the young people that were now choosing what would be happening in this activity trail. So
as a newcomer to Ampthill, as someone who was born after the book was published, and you deep diving into it, which I know you did because I tried to get some books out of the library at the time.
Sorry.
And this guy called Ross had them all out. So do you feel more connected to the place knowing that story?
Yeah, totally. I think for me, I've always been, wherever I've lived, I've always wanted to feel like you're in the fabric of the place, and it's not until you discover these absolute gems you suddenly feel like you're let into a different kind of connection to that place. So I think even just looking at the illustrations and walking past the clock tower or walking past St. Catherine's Cross, you feel a sense of, for me anyway, immense privilege and pride to be in this world that was created by Kit Williams. And, you know, me telling my family about it, and when they visit, I go into that kind of like geek mode and like, have you spotted the golden hairs yet? And this is literally on the equinox at midday. This is where it would have been discovered. So I do feel a great sense of connection, and it connected me to local people.
I want to ask you one last question, and that is really about the continuation of this story.
You appreciate it sometimes for when it happened, and you can still feel the sprinkles of magic, even though it's not overtly obvious. So I think there's a beauty in leaving things as they are, which I know Kit Williams, from watching and reading all of these different things, can feel a bit of a curse to it. But then the other side of me, which is probably more weighted toward, there's more reasons why I do want to do something than not to, is I think it's something to celebrate, and I think Ampthill and this story are inextricably linked forever. And for future generations, I think having more of a sense of what this experience was and why it was so important to this place, I think is something important to mark. And whether marking it is in a bit of public art or whether it is a continuation of this work through a thematic base or project, I feel like it does need to be kept alive. So I definitely feel like I want to do something, but I also feel like it can't just be something on a bench,
Yeah.
a plaque that someone
Yeah.
puts. It needs presence and it needs prominence. So I'm not sure what that thing is yet, but I think it's time to give it its moment in the sun forever.
Thank you, Ross. One last thing.
Yeah.
Would you like to give a shout out to the wonderful Full House Theatre?
I would.
So you are a freelance creative and you work
Yes.
all over Central
Yep.
Bedfordshire and beyond.
Yes.
But we're so lucky to have Full House Theatre here in Ampthill. Would you want to give them a little shout
I'd
out?
love to give them a shout out. So for people that aren't familiar, so Full House, they are based in Ampthill. They do work across Central Bedfordshire, Luton, beyond. They tour nationally, locally, and they really are just such a special organisation. So their mission is to bring arts and theatre to young people, to families, and to kind of just unlock this magic. And they just do so much incredible work. And it's, for me, what's really important, it's not always in the places that you expect the work to happen. So it's not always going to be in a theatre or an art space. A lot of the work can take place in schools, on traveller sites, in public spaces. So do check them out. They are fullhousetheatre.org.uk, and you can follow them on Facebook, Instagram.
Story Search, Central Bedfordshire.
I'm Kelvin Horton. I'm the official town crier in Ampthill. Today I'm dressed as my alter ego, Sir Isaac Newton, who is on one of the plates in Kit Williams' book, Masquerade.
Kelvin, whenever I speak to anybody in Ampthill about Masquerade, they all say you have to speak to Kelvin.
I see, do they?
They do. So could you tell us a little bit about why Masquerade has become so important to you?
Oh yes. I bought the book for my daughter when she was 10. I got hooked by the book. I realised that there were allusions to Ampthill, but I never completely caught on. I deciphered the clues and decided the hare was buried in Scotland. So for our holiday one year, we drove up to Scotland, my wife, 2 children, mother-in-law and a dog. I soon realised the impossibility of the task, but we enjoyed our holiday.
And did you actually start digging?
Yes. Accompanied by, have we finished yet? You know, can we go and get something to eat? And because we were camping.
What month?
Oh, no, August. Yeah. It was a good holiday.
So, Dad, we're at the top of a boggy mountain
In Scotland.
Yeah, and there's midges everywhere. We dragged a spade up to the top. Where are you suggesting this golden hare is? How long did you dig for? Did you
Only about 10 minutes. I soon realised I got it wrong. Yeah. When it came to the 40th anniversary, the town, I helped the town council out in various ways, and they'd mentioned that they wanted to do something for the 40th anniversary, and they asked me what I knew about it. And when they found out that story, they decided that I should chair the committee to investigate how we should celebrate the 40th anniversary.
You were gripped
Yes.
by Masquerade fever, if we could call it that. Can I ask whereabouts you were living at the time?
In Ampthill.
You were living in Ampthill.
Yes. So when people found out that it was discovered in Ampthill, they assumed that I had discovered it.
And yet you were packing your family into a car and driving for 5 hours to go to Scotland.
Yes.
How did it make you feel when it was found in Ampthill?
Oh, I was chuffed.
Were you? Any jealousy?
No,
No.
I got it wrong, of course.
But you knew there was a link to Ampthill.
I've interviewed the man who dug it up, Dougal Thompson, and to profit from it, he arranged a computer competition. We're talking 40 years ago now, so it didn't work out very well, and he lost. He bankrupted himself, so he had to sell the hare, and it was bought by an Egyptian gentleman.
Okay.
I suspect he's now passed on, but his granddaughter wears it on her birthday and on Christmas Day.
Wow.
and it has been exhibited at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Right. Isn't that fascinating? So from Ampthill to Africa.
Yes.
Yeah. So you don't feel that he thought it would ever be found?
Well, the clues on the face of it are impossible to solve.
So how were they solved?
Well, Dougal Thompson found it really by accident. He didn't go through the complicated discovery on each page. He noticed that one of the slogans around the picture said one of 6 to 8. He was actively looking for the hare, and he was driving past Ampthill Park and realised that 1 of 6 to 8 meant Catherine of Aragon. She's one of the 6 wives to the 8th Henry.
Yeah.
And proceeded to dig up around Catherine. There's a cross to commemorate Catherine of Aragon in Ampthill Park. And he says that he was excavating there one Saturday morning, and a lady came along and said, "What are you doing, my man? I'm a town councillor, and I really think that we should know about this." And he said, "Well, we've heard that there's a problem with subsidence under this cross, and we're doing some investigation." "Oh, very good, my man, just carry on." And then he says that I think he had to come along more than once, because finding a spot where a shadow of a cross lands is pretty impossible. So he dug up a large area. When he eventually found it, it's in a clay casket, which he showed me. He then had the problem of replacing his excavation, and the Ampthill cadets were exercising in the park at the time with big boots. So he got them along to trample the earth back down.
Isn't that fascinating? So in the Bamber Gascoigne book, have you read the
Yes.
book? There was a quad of people, 2 couples who had cracked the puzzle, and they'd got there maybe the night before.
No, they never got there. But well, you can imagine the amount of time it would take to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And I think they were mathematicians, and they had realised how it worked, and they were due to go and dig it up, but the partners wanted to go on holiday, and so they went on holiday instead.
Yeah, so close. And they were the guys that really they figured it out in its purest sense. If I were to give you a magic wand and an unlimited budget, would you? And if so, how would you commemorate Masquerade within Ampthill?
Well, with an unlimited budget, I would set up another puzzle.
Oh, right. So you do the rematch,
Yes.
the sequel.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, last but not least, I know that you have brought with you a what would you call this? An apparatus to help us understand how to decode, because myself and Cassandra have looked at the book, and I don't think either of us would have got very far. So what I'm looking at here is a small corkboard, notice board, and one of the pictures from the book, and around the side it says Jack
be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the flame.
Over the flame. And we have a man that's dressed very much like you are today, and that's Isaac Newton. How do we know that's Isaac Newton?
It says in the script. It says a book. Yeah.
Okay, so in the text of the book. And he has got 2 puppets, and behind him there are a series of animals hanging up on hooks, and there's 1 candle flame. Now, I would look at that for 20 years and never see any solutions pop out. What you've also got here are some pins, and you have pinned some string across the picture. So can you tell us how this helps us to decode it?
Right at the beginning of Williams's Masquerade, it tells you to use your eyes. The right eye takes precedence over the left eye, and you draw a line through the right eye and the longest finger, and then it will then intersect one of the letters in the text around the picture. So we get an O there, be H first, and an O there, and you work round the eyes with humans taking precedent over dolls, and dolls taking precedent over animals. So we've got in his sleeve we've got a little dormouse. So it's too difficult to explain in words, but you will then have a key word which you fit into a text. I think it will then indicate that you find Catherine's long finger, which is the cross, where it intersects on the ground at the solstice.
I have it here. Shall I read it out?
Yes.
So this is a spoiler for anyone who doesn't want to do the hard work of figuring it out. If you get yourself to Ampthill Great Park, here's your puzzle. Catherine's long finger overshadows earth, buried amulet. Midday points the hour, in light of the equinox, look you. So you have to be there on that one day, and if you're lucky with the shadows, it will point to where it was found.
It is twice a year.
Twice a year?
Yeah, the spring and autumn.
Ah, of course.
Equinox.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Kelvin.
Cheers.
Story Search, Central Bedfordshire.
So, Cassandra, we have had a little trip to Ampthill, and we've spoken to Amy, the library manager at the beautiful Ampthill Library, and our colleague Liz, and we also met Ross Spurwell-Williams and the town crier, Kelvin, and they've all told us a little bit about Masquerade and their view on it. What do you think?
I think it is something that I need to explore. I am so intrigued by this book. I'm intrigued by the mind of the person that can come up with a treasure hunt that takes 3 years to solve. I'm intrigued at the amount of writing that's been inspired by this one person's piece of work. And I think it's exciting, and I can't believe that in our generation, those that were born in the 80s, there hasn't sort of been a phenomenon similar that I'm aware of that has taken over people in quite the same way. And I think it would be fantastic if somebody did something like that again.
And yet it's probably not possible now. I think what Amy and Liz were saying about how Erin Kelly in her book The Skeleton Key had kind of reimagined it with some of the modern trappings of social media and what have you, it just doesn't feel like it could happen in the same way.
No, because you do get treasure hunts that are organised using, phones and apps and things like that. But to have people, trek to Scotland from England, take flights abroad, be so convinced and invested that they might be the ones to find a piece of treasure, I just can't imagine that. It sounds like a piece of fiction in itself. It's just amazing to think that it was real behaviours of real people.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating to me. I mean, the book itself is a beautiful object to look at, and it's fascinating. It's incomprehensible to me. I would never be able to figure out the answers. But for me, just digging into it, and I think we heard a little bit from Kelvin there about this very human response to wanting to find that treasure. It's deep coded in us, isn't it, to want to find the treasure, to want to solve the puzzle.
It's really evident how popular it was, because we've spoken to two different people, two completely separate lives, stories, families, backgrounds, and each of them, either themselves or within their families, had people go looking and trying to solve this. And to think I'd never heard of it until now is really interesting. It would be great to be a bit more celebrated and understood and relived, because it's still interesting for younger generations. I think children would find this fascinating. I understand the book isn't entirely appropriate for people and is difficult to decode for adults, let alone young people and children, but who doesn't love a treasure hunt, and to know that the treasure was right on your doorstep here in Central Bedfordshire? What a story.
What a story indeed. Well, thank you for coming to my hometown.
So next we are heading to...
Where are we going?
Toddington.
Toddington?
Yes.
Ooh.
We are uncovering a story there, not linked to treasure hunts, but more around local theatre, amateur dramatics, and the impact and history it has on the community in Toddington and beyond.
Well, I shall get my jazz hands ready.
Lovely.
It's really something, the treasures all around us we might find, left all around me is a secret shrouded by a veil of time. I'll share it with you. 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 I'll share it with you.
How are we starting?
We've started.
Have we? Okay.